medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your physician or other qualified health provider with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition, and always get proper treatment for serious medical conditions. Legal disclaimer: use only legal measures to combat the virus and cooperate with government officials, first responders, and healthcare workers to make the coronavirus a thing of the past and create a perfect society ASAP. Use common sense, logic, and help your fellow humans if necessary, also to lower the risk of being vaccinated mandatorily ourselves and to end the pandemic as soon as possible. The objective of my videos is not to slander people nor to incite or trigger people, but to do the opposite, exposing it when people are wrongly accused, and to create universal peace, world peace, or just peace on earth. People are innocent till proven guilty in the court of law. One who knows of evidence must testify, not to convict anyone without a fair trial. Greetings, superior beings, greetings, supreme being. We are all the human race. Our common enemy is death. Welcome on Genuine News. I am Ulrich Hoffman, and you're watching the broadcast Protests and Martial Law Plan for Inauguration Day. Insurrection Act Get Body Bagged. The main purpose of this broadcast is preventing a martial law scenario, preventing martial law from being imposed, and the Executive Order 11,000 from being implemented, preventing beats curing. When they implement Executive Order 11,000, that means that the US population can be rounded up and put in camps under federal supervision, worker camps. Not so much re-education camps, because they're gonna have to build back better, the World Economic Forum's slogan, build back better, Bill Gates' compact cities. So they cannot build these compact cities of Bill Gates without demolishing the normal cities, without demolishing the real cities. Thousands of National Guard troops stationed in Capitol building in the background, as you can see. So what is the main way to prevent this? They've planned National Guards, many troops, to be stationed around the country when the inauguration of Joe Biden takes place. And so the best way to prevent martial law conditions, to prevent blood in the streets, etc., I think, is not to go protesting. Also for your personal safety, not even protesting, but if you do go protesting, make sure it's an unarmed, peaceful protest, and keep an eye on your environment so that you can report or unmask possible shills, control the position, people that are hired to make peaceful protests unpeaceful. They can also be operatives of the state, agents that infiltrate protests, protesters, to lead the opposition themselves, to prevent any opposition to what the state, the government wants to do, basically, that may be infiltrated by these secret societies that I've talked about. So I'm gonna have to switch to the Opera browser now. So preventing it, one way in this possible scenario is to just not go protesting, not to give them any excuse to declare martial law. So I'm going to switch to the Opera browser, working on that now. Yes, okay. So then I'll start with this National Guard. It says it will deploy at least 10,000 troops in DC by Saturday to boost security ahead of Inauguration, 10,000 troops. This is on MarketWatch. I have some other articles. Takes a while to switch. Everything I do is sabotage to a certain extent, which they can do with Tesla's wireless energy technology, worldwide wireless. The patents that I've covered in my broadcast about scalar patents, radiant energy patents. And scientists agree that wireless energy exists. And that's the same thing, scalar waves, wireless energy. Not microwaves, but scalar wave harassment. National Guard to deploy, quote, at least, unquote, 10,000 troops to DC ahead of inauguration. And they're all reporting the same thing on the same day, January 11th. It was reported. So what I want to look at is Insurrection Act of 1807. What is it? What can they do with it? Martial law, the wiki article. What's this? Biden inauguration to feature virtual nationwide parade. Virtual parade. Reminds me of Starlink, of Elon Musk, where the people supposedly see a rocket taking off on a big screen and they're all cheering, etc. And I've covered this article of ABC News already. I've also covered 4 reasons why manned space travel may be impossible with the spacecraft they pretend or claim they've done it with, that they've done it with. Armed protests being planned at all 50 state capitals, FBI bulletin says. An internal FBI note obtained by ABC News shows warnings of, quote, a huge uprising, unquote. So even if you think there was voter fraud, which many people deny, then that's no reason to bring about martial law conditions, because that would not be in the benefit of the US population. Some people are for it, they benefit from it. What some would call the 1%, the establishment. The now banned Alex Jones used to use the term globalists. He said globalism is a bad thing, but these are imperialists. They're pursuing a new world order, also clear from what Joe Biden said. He spoke out in favor of a new world order. And in this article, what I found interesting is they write, quote, the FBI received information about an identified armed group intending to travel to Washington, D.C. on January 16th. The bulletin read. So they've identified this armed group, but they're not letting us know who it is, basically. Isn't that weird? So in my previous broadcast, I've also covered the Proud Boys. If it's another group, if you think it's any other group, let me know what group you think they're talking about. And why would they keep that secret unless they want to bring it about, if it's just one identified armed group? Shouldn't they let us know which group we're talking about here to know how to prevent this event? I think is more important than just reporting what you've heard and the information you're being fed from Reuters or whatever. So everybody, all these mainstream media outlets, news outlets, are writing the same lies, basically. It's called propaganda. For example, the lie that 5G microwave radiation would be harmless, and that reproducible blood tests we can do proves beyond any reasonable doubt to ourselves that they're lying. Obviously, 5G and microwave radiation in general are a health hazard, and I've covered all these studies in my previous broadcasts. What's on Facebook. Ochai wrote about the Corbett report. I don't know to what extent they are controlled position. And they linked to hashtag New World Next Week. Well, that's what some people are pursuing, a population reduction to 500 million, cramming everybody into Bill Gates's so-called compact cities, or so-called smart cities. I'd rather have a smarter city without any cancer, cell phone, microwave radiation. Anyone else notice how expensive meat is all of a sudden? It's cadavers. Well, animal protein and animal fat increase people's cancer risk, so that's why it helps with the population reduction. Also because up to 16 kilograms of grain are needed to produce 1 kilogram of cancer hormone cow meat. And people can go vegetarian, go vegan anytime they want to, basically. I'm a vegetarian, and the vegan diet is the healthiest diet as long as people use enough vitamin B12, vitamin D3, and eat a balanced diet, get the minerals, get everything they need. Then they don't get problems with their nails and their hair. If they don't take vitamin B12, then they can die from it. So then it's not the healthiest diet if they're not getting enough vitamin B12, which can also be from vegan sources like vitamin D3. I might take a B12 myself. Sometimes I do that. I don't do it too much. I don't want too many hydrolyzed tablets. This is Ortica, but there are several others. 90 tablets of vitamin B12. And of course, people can also use antiviral essential oils, etherical oils, of which is scientifically proven that they are antiviral. Another thing I'm using at the moment is propolis, just because I like the taste of it. I have some turpentine. The gum spirits of turpentine taste more like anise, basically. It has a bit of anise flavor to it. And of course, this is meant to be inhaled, but people on YouTube have shown videos of how they are ingesting it. But all these essential oils are meant to be inhaled, not to be ingested. So I cannot advise people to do that. And I'm not a medical doctor, this is not medical advice. But on YouTube you can see how they ingest 1 or 2 drops of turpentine to get rid of parasites and other things. Chamomile, I like chamomile as well. But qua antiviral oil, tea tree oil may be best. And there's peppermint and eucalyptus globulus, eucalyptus. And I have loads of essential oils here. So the question is, I like vetiver as well. Vetiver with myrrh. Commiphora momo or something. So yeah, essential oils are great as well. Renee G. Berenson writes, 12th of November 2020, 11-year-old, an informed, consenting adult will actually hide this information from parents. The capital plan to destroy all parental rights, DC to give children vaccine consent behind their parents' backs. Well, of course, we can't let that happen either, but for now I want to focus on preventing martial law. So, perhaps I should start here and then what we have. a search on YouTube on protest. SPD declares unlawful assembly after protesters clash in Pacific Beach. Warning: graphic content, police clash with boarding protesters. How police handled MAGA Capitol mob compared with BLM protesters. MAGA actually also has meaning to the Satanists. Or look on churchofsatan.com/hierarchy. Then we can see MAGA's fifth degree. So that's the highest degree in Satanism, right? Registered member, the lowest, no degree. Active member, Satanist, first degree. Witch warlock, second degree. Of course, real witches and warlocks do not exist, you could argue. Priestess, priest, third degree. Magistra, magister, fourth degree, and Maga's fifth degree. So, I've made clear religion is an abomination, religion is an illusion, to quote Freud. That's just to show this MAGA thing, which, according to them, stands for Make America Great Again. And it can remind people of other figures in history that were and are still seen as the bad guy. Farmers protest, Indian farmers clash with police. That's not it. FBI memo warns of threats of possible armed protests at 50 state capitals. But we have to prevent this in the US, because if we cannot prevent this, they can use the US as a vehicle to take over the world, because the US spend more than all other countries combined on the bloody military-industrial complex. So that's why I am trying to prevent this, and I hope I get more views. So please let others know that I'm live, and share this video after it has been streamed live on your platforms to help prevent martial law from being imposed. US Capitol attack compared to BLM protests. 6 days ago, ET Canada. That might also be interesting. So, what videos did I pre-select? Alright, this was the one I talked about. SPD declares unlawful assembly after protests clash at Pacific Beach. So, this is on CBS 8 San Diego. I don't see any clashing, basically. And I first thought, well, it's one group of police and one group of protesters. So the question is also, with whom do they clash? With the police or with other protesters? Police cordoned off the streets and they're just standing in front of the police. They don't move away from the police to other places. They just stand there, which I find fascinating as well to a certain extent. But let's fast forward a bit. Because it takes 42 minutes, almost 43 minutes to watch this whole video. And we see nothing happening, basically. Photographers photographing the police on their knees. I'm just hiding the chat to avoid violations of certain user policy. But of course I'm watching this video to see if there is any clash in reality. No audio with it also. Indicated at the top of the screen. Waving flags. Gadsden flag also. We've seen a return of that. Don't tread on me. Don't tread on me, I mean. Be wiser than serpents, you all. Dehumanization is part of the 10 phases of genocide, and they might see the military as the serpent, basically. Serpents are right. Well, any clashes? So where are the clashes? But I like palm trees. We don't need clashes. We want to prevent martial law. So, any ideas about preventing clashes and preventing imposition of martial law are welcome. I'll check the chats. Nobody in the chat yet? Wow. Sad. So the algorithms, etc. are supposedly used so nobody finds this broadcast. Also, perhaps, well, I think there are people that are uploading videos about this stuff, which we'll get to. So that was number one. That was not interesting, but it was a nice video anyway. Sunny with palm trees, etc. And showing how the police blocked the street for the peaceful protesters that were not clashing enough, according to the people that want to impose martial law that might actually finance them to do so. Ahead of pro-Trump protests, Proud Boys leader arrested for burning BLM banner at Black Church. I've reported about that as well. This is on Democracy Now! I think we're not in a true democracy, and they're trying to trash capitalism, but their alternative seems to be utter communism. You'll own nothing and you'll be happy. The World Economic Forum slogan of 2016, still on their Facebook page. I've covered it in my previous broadcast, for example. And they've started demolishing homes in Great Britain. I did a broadcast about it as well when I saw that, under the guise of COVID-19 contamination. I have explained why I think it doesn't work, it's not effective, and councils can order demolition of cars and homes in Great Britain. And they've started doing that already. Oh yeah, that's, I don't know. Was he the supposed leader? I've also talked about it in my previous broadcast. He doesn't look very white, that's clear. Perhaps Brazilian or whatever. I'd have to check that Wiki Proud Boys article again. I don't know his name. And we've seen that that article has become huge. The first time I covered it was a tiny article, and now Proud Boys is a huge article on Wikipedia. So let's just go to Wiki and then search Proud Boys. So this is what it looks like when we log into Wikipedia without searching on any topic. And it doesn't have icon when I searched on it. But okay, let's see. Since early 2019, Enrique Tarrio, an Afro-Cuban American has been the chairman of the Proud Boys. So then that rules out that they are white supremacists, right? People can join my anti-racist White Lives Matter movement, Skype Prologic 999. I've also made a new email address for that. And anybody can join, so it doesn't matter what skin color you have. Skin color is only skin deep. Color is only skin deep, is the slogan. And I agree with that, so I think new groups will form regardless of sexual orientation, skin color, and religious preference, because I think it's clear this is all part of a gigantic population reduction agenda, and they're doing several things simultaneously to achieve their population reduction and to be able to impose their satanic, Luciferian, totalitarian, dictatorial, global government, new world order, Adolf Hitler had the Neuordnung, Third Reich theme, and in what way is what we're seeing now different from that? So how can we prevent these armed protests from taking place? That's one question. So doesn't that prove their claim that they're not racists themselves to be true? Because their leader is an Afro-Cuban American, according to the Wiki Proud Boys article. So, what am I gonna read next? Are there any preferences? Let's take a look at the chat again. Not yet. Yesterday I had more viewers. Well, I'm gonna first read Insurrection Act of 1807 article on Wikipedia. It's very lengthy. I think that's doable. We can read the whole thing in less than 5 minutes probably. Implications of the act. It's a satanic prayer or what? Let's copy this. And again, I want to focus on preventing it, so I'm just studying this to prevent it. In my previous broadcast, I've shown 5 ways to prevent martial law from being imposed. And at that time, it wasn't even about protests, etc. The idea is that they'll impose medical martial law at a certain point. So to what extent they want to use these events is another matter. But many people say they think that they're going to use this as an excuse to impose martial law. They're going to do stuff staged, and well, hopefully they'll be fake. But if it's staged, it doesn't mean that it's fake. It can also be real shootings, real dead people, real blood in the streets. Otherwise they cannot declare martial law. That's what some people are after. They're not trying to prevent it, but to bring it about. And they can be members of secret societies. You have the Bilderburgers, Skull and Bones, for example, Manoeuvren, Skull and Bones Society, also called the Brotherhood of Death, according to sources online, but of course it's not provable. So, but many people, there seems to be a consensus about Mnuchin being a member of Skull and Bones. And they're associated with the Jesuits as well. Illuminati is also a Jesuit front, according to sources online. So you have Bill Gates, Bilderberg member, George Soros as well, of course. And the list of Bilderberg participants is online, so that's how people know, basically. So that's less secretive, I think, than members of the Freemasonic societies with their Freemasonic lodges. And they were forbidden in China, but I think they have lodges in China as well. And the CDC and CCP, China's Communist Party, are working closely together. So it's wrong to blame whole countries for the things they're doing, which the mainstream media is also dabbling in. Perhaps we cannot be negative enough about the mainstream media. Very well, let me know in the comments. Let's read this Insurrection Acts wiki article. I already prepared it. So let's switch to the Balabolka thing. Transition. Whoa. Okay. So many people are already awake now. I think they want to help. They would also want to prevent martial law not to end up in these worker camps to build back better Bill Gates' compact cities.
Visit my YouTube channels, Genuine News, Perfect Society, Try Something. Vegetarian, and the Future channel on YouTube. Be prepared, everyone. Form real resistance to death, our common enemy. Safety first. Mir, Salam, Shalom, Hiwa, Major typing on, Shanti Shanti. Universal Everton now. Universal Peace now. Insurrection Act of 1807 from Wikipedia, the free encyclopedia. Redirected from Insurrection Act. Jump to navigation. Jump to search. Insurrection Act of 1807. Great Seal of the United States. Long title. An act authorizing the employment of the land and naval forces of the United States, in cases of insurrections enacted by the 9th United States Congress effective March 3, 1807. Citations. Public Law 939. Statutes at Large 2 Stat. 443. Legislative history. Signed into law by President Thomas Jefferson on March 3, 1807. Major amendments 1871, 2006, 2007. The Insurrection Act of 1807 is a United States federal law that empowers the President of the United States to deploy U.S. military and federalized National Guard troops within the United States in particular circumstances, such as to suppress civil disorder, insurrection or rebellion. The Act provides a statutory exception to the Posse Comitatus Act of 1878, which limits the use of military personnel under federal command for law enforcement purposes within the United States. 2-3. Before invoking the powers under the Act, 10 U.S.C. Section 254 requires the President to first publish a proclamation ordering the insurgents to disperse. As part of the Posse Comitatus Act of 1878, these provisions are now codified as amended. There are constitutional exceptions to Posse Comitatus restrictions rooted in the President's own constitutional authority. Defense Department guidelines describe Homeland Defense as a constitutional exception to Posse Comitatus restriction, meaning that measures necessary to guarantee national security from external threats are not subject to the same limitations. Contents 1 Purpose and Content 2 Application 3 Invocations of the Act 4 See also 5 References 6 External links Purpose and Content The Act empowers the U.S. President to call into service the U.S. Armed Forces and the National Guard. When requested by a state's legislature, or governor if the legislature cannot be convened, to address an insurrection against that state. Section 251, to address an insurrection, in any state, which makes it impracticable to enforce the law. Section 252, or to address an insurrection, domestic violence, unlawful combination or conspiracy, in any state, which results in the deprivation of constitutionally secured rights, and where the state is unable, fails, or refuses to protect said rights. Section 253. The 1807 Act replaced the earlier Calling Forth Act of 1792, which had allowed for federalization of state militias, with similar language that allowed either for federalization of state militias or use of the regular armed forces in the case of rebellion against a state government. 460. The 1807 Act has been modified twice. In 1861, a new section was added allowing the federal government to use the National Guard and armed forces against the will of the state government in the case of rebellion against the authority of the government of the United States, in anticipation of continued unrest after the Civil War. 5. In 1871, the Third Enforcement Act revised this section, Section 253, to protect Black Americans from attacks by the Ku Klux Klan. The language added at that time allows the federal government to use the act to enforce the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment to the United States Constitution. 463-64 This section of the act was invoked during the Reconstruction era, and again during desegregation fights during the Civil Rights era. 6. The Chief Clause of the Insurrection Act, in its original 1807 wording, which has been thoroughly updated since to reflect modern legalese, reads, 7. An act authorizing the employment of the land and naval forces of the United States, in cases of insurrections be it enacted by the Senate and House of Representatives of the United States of America in Congress assembled, that in all cases of insurrection, or obstruction to the laws, either of the United States, or of any individual state or territory, where it is lawful for the President of the United States to call forth the militia for the purpose of suppressing such insurrection, or of causing the laws to be duly executed, it shall be lawful for him to employ, for the same purposes, such part of the land or naval force of the United States, as shall be judged necessary, having first observed all the prerequisites of the law in that respect. 8-9. In 2016, Public Law 114-328 was amended to include Guam and the U.S. Virgin Islands under Ch. 13 jurisdiction. Section 252, Use of Militia and Armed Forces to Enforce Federal Authority currently reads: whenever the President considers that unlawful obstructions, combinations, or assemblages, or rebellion against the authority of the United States, make it impracticable to enforce the laws of the United States in any state by the ordinary course of judicial proceedings, he may call into federal service such of the militia of any state, and use such of the armed forces, as he considers necessary to enforce those laws or to suppress the rebellion. 10-7. Application: The Insurrection Act has been invoked throughout American history. In the 19th century, it was invoked during conflicts with Native Americans. In the late 19th and early 20th centuries, it was invoked during labor conflicts. Later in the 20th century, it was used to enforce federally mandated desegregation. 11. With Presidents Dwight D. Eisenhower and John F. Kennedy invoking the act in opposition to the affected states' political leaders to enforce court-ordered desegregation. 12. More recently, governors have requested and received support following looting in the aftermath of Hurricane Hugo in 1989 and during the 1992 Los Angeles riots. 13. In 2006, the George W. Bush administration considered intervening in the state of Louisiana's response to Hurricane Katrina despite the refusal from Louisiana's governor, but this was inconsistent with past precedent, politically difficult, and potentially unconstitutional. 473-75 A provision of the John Warner National Defense Authorization Act for fiscal year 2007, added by an unidentified sponsor, amended the Insurrection Act to permit military intervention without state consent, in case of an emergency that hindered the enforcement of laws. 2. Bush signed this amendment into law, but some months after it was enacted, all 50 state governors issued a joint statement against it. and the changes were repealed in January 2008. 2. On June 1, 2020, President Donald Trump warned that he would invoke the act in response to the George Floyd protests following the killing of George Floyd. 14/15/16, in his official statement, Trump urged every governor to deploy the National Guard in sufficient numbers to re-establish civil law and order until the violence has been quelled. 17. Invocations of the act. This list is incomplete. You can help by adding missing items with reliable sources. Colloidal silver. Colloidal silver.
We can read the biggest genocide in human history didn't occur in Nazi Germany, but on American soil. 100 million Native Americans were slaughtered and lost their homeland. Okay. Okay, for posting it, I think that there have been wars in the past, but many US citizens were born in the US, and I think they've made deals with Native American Indians, so they're not totally gone from the US. I like their minerals, and well, I've also seen the alligator wrestling, which can also go wrong sometimes. There are videos of that as well. So I like their art, definitely. So I'm not condoning what happened in any way. I'm against war, anti-war, pro-universal peace. As you all may know from my previous channels, I also had the Universal Peace channel, and I still do have some Universal Peace channels. But for now I want to focus on preventing martial law. It's just to exemplify that it happened in the past and that the army was involved with that as well. So if there's army, then that causes major problems. It can cause major problems because they're heavily armed, etc. That's why they're called the army, basically. So they've invocated the act, the Insurrection Act of 1807. In 1808, first time Thomas Jefferson, all these people, Abraham Lincoln, also listed. Affected area, many states, occasion civil war. 1861. And most recently 1992 by George Herbert Walker Bush. It was state requested. In affected area was Los Angeles County, California, and it was, the occasion was the 1992 Los Angeles riots. So riots can be a reason to invoke this Insurrection Act. And then we see listed the US military. United States Armed Forces are the military forces of the United States of America. It consists of the Army, Marine Corps, Navy, Air Force, Space Force, and Coast Guard. And of course, the US spend more on the military than all of the other nations combined, actually. What I've read. So most people know what the military encompasses, but besides that, the National Guard. So study the National Guard, and the word we're seeing frequently is militia. So we can also check United States militia wiki article. But perhaps I'll only read the intro to this, it's a bit too much.
The United States National Guard is part of the reserve components of the United States Army and the United States Air Force. It is a military reserve force composed of National Guard military members or units of each state and the territories of Guam, the Virgin Islands, and Puerto Rico, and the District of Columbia, for a total of 54 separate organizations. All members of the National Guard of the United States are also members of the Organized Militia of the United States as defined by 10 U.S.C. Section 246. National Guard units are under the dual control of the state governments and the federal government. The majority of National Guard soldiers and airmen hold a civilian job full-time while serving part-time as a National Guard member. 2-3. These part-time guardsmen are augmented by a full-time cadre of active Guard and Reserve, AGR, personnel in both the Army National Guard and Air National Guard, plus Army Reserve technicians in the Army National Guard and Air Reserve technicians, ART, in the Air National Guard. The National Guard is a joint activity of the United States Department of Defense, DoD, composed of reserve components of the United States Army and the United States Air Force, the Army National Guard II, and the Air National Guard, respectively. 2. Local militias were formed from the earliest English colonization of the Americas in 1607. The first colony-wide militia was formed by Massachusetts in 1636 by merging small older local units, and several National Guard units can be traced back to this militia. The various colonial militias became state militias when the United States became independent. The title National Guard was used in 1824 by some New York State militia units, named after the French National Guard in honor of the Marquis de Lafayette. National Guard became a standard nationwide militia title in 1903, and specifically indicated reserve forces under mixed state and federal control since 1933. In 1986, Congress passed the Montgomery Amendment, which prohibited state governors from withholding their consent to overseas deployments for training purposes. The Supreme Court upheld this law in 1990, ruling against Minnesota's Governor in Perpick v. Department of Defense. 4. In 2006, Congress passed the 2007 National Defense Authorization Act, which gave the President the authority to mobilize National Guard units within the U.S. without the consent of state governors.
So this is the nationalguard.mil website. Oklahoma Guard delivers state's first COVID-19 vaccine. The Oklahoma National Guard, in cooperation with the Oklahoma State Department of Health, delivered the first COVID-19 vaccines in the state on December 15th. Read more. There you have it. So then we can read United States militia. Wiki article.
The militia of the United States, as defined by the U.S. Congress, has changed over time. 1. During colonial America, all able-bodied men of a certain age range were members of the militia, depending on the respective state's rule. 2. Individual towns formed local independent militias for their own defense. 3. The year before the U.S. Constitution was ratified, the Federalist Papers detailed the founders' paramount vision of the militia in 1787. 4-5. The new Constitution empowered Congress to organize, arm, and discipline this national military force, leaving significant control in the hands of each state government. 6-7. Today, as defined by the Militia Act of 1903, the term militia is used to describe two classes within the United States. 8. Organized militia, consisting of state militia forces, notably, the National Guard and Naval Militia. 9. Unorganized militia, comprising the reserve militia, every able-bodied man of at least 17 and under 45 years of age, not a member of the National Guard or Naval Militia. 10. A third militia is a state defense force. It is authorized by state and federal laws. 11. Congress has organized the National Guard under its power to raise and support armies and not its power to provide for organizing, arming and disciplining the militia. 12. This Congress chose to do in the interests of organizing reserve military units which were not limited in deployment by the strictures of its power over the constitutional militia, which can be called forth only to execute the laws of the Union, suppress insurrections and repel invasions. The modern National Guard was specifically intended to avoid status as the constitutional militia, a distinction recognized by 10 U.S.C. Section 311A. The U.S. ideal of the citizen soldier, in the militia, depicted by the Concord Minuteman of 1775, a monument created by Daniel Chester French and erected in 1875, in Concord, Massachusetts. Wikipedia.org. Martial law is the temporary imposition of direct military control of normal civil functions or suspension of civil law by a government, especially in response to a temporary emergency where civil forces are overwhelmed, or in an occupied territory.
I'm just restarting my text-to-speech engine. Basically, it should be there in a couple of seconds. Sorry about the delay. There it is. Loaded.
Typically, the imposition of martial law accompanies curfews, the suspension of civil law, civil rights, and habeas corpus, and the application or extension of military law or military justice to civilians. Civilians defying martial law may be subjected to military tribunal, court-martial. Suspension of civil law, civil rights, and habeas corpus. Civil law is a legal system originating in continental Europe and adopted in much of the world. Civil and political rights are a class of rights that protect individuals' freedom from infringement by governments, social organizations, and private individuals. Habeas corpus is a recourse in law through which a person can report an unlawful detention or imprisonment to a court and request that the court order the custodian of the person, usually a prison official, to bring the prisoner to court, to determine whether the detention is lawful. The Posse Comitatus Act is a United States federal law, 18 U.S.C., Section 1385, original at 20 Stat. 152, signed on June 18, 1878, by President Rutherford B. Hayes, which limits the powers of the federal government in the use of federal military personnel to enforce domestic policies within the United States. The act was passed as an amendment to an Army appropriation bill following the end of Reconstruction and was updated in 1956 and 1981. The act specifically applies only to the United States Army and, as amended in 1956, the United States Air Force. Although the act does not explicitly mention the United States Navy and the United States Marine Corps, the Department of the Navy has prescribed regulations that are generally construed to give the act force with respect to those services as well. The act does not prevent the Army National Guard or the Air National Guard under state authority from acting in a law enforcement capacity within its home state or in an adjacent state if invited by that state's governor. The United States Coast Guard, under the Department of Homeland Security, and United States Space Force, under the Department of the Air Force, are not governed by the Act either, primarily because although both are armed services, they also have maritime and space law enforcement missions respectively. The title of the Act comes from the legal concept of posse comitatus, the authority under which a county sheriff, or other law officer, can conscript any able-bodied person to assist in keeping the peace. See also DEFCON Gendarmerie Military Rule, Disambiguation, Stratocracy, a form of government headed by military generals, police state, state governed through the power of the police force, military junta, a government led by a committee of military leaders, military dictatorship, a form of autocratic rule led by the military, authoritarianism, a form of government with strong central power and limited freedoms. A military dictatorship is a dictatorship in which military experts exert complete and substantial control over political authority, and the dictator is often a high-ranked military officer. The reverse situation is to have civilian control of the military. Occasionally, military dictatorship is called kakistocracy. 1, 2, 3. The term is a portmanteau word combining kakistocracy with khaki, the tan green camouflage color used in most modern army uniforms. Some countries such as Burma have semi-military dictators as granted by their constitutions. A kakistocracy is a system of government that is run by the worst, least qualified, and or most unscrupulous citizens.
Kakistocracy. Kakistocracy was mentioned by Guy in the chat. So it's interesting that I run into that now. That's when I least expected. Biden inauguration to feature virtual nationwide parade. Well, if it's virtual, then why all the military guards, military, etc. are protests being planned at all 50 state capitals? FBI bulletin says. How could they know this at all 50 state capitals? And again, they've identified the armed group intending to travel to Washington, D.C. on January 16th, and today is the 14th of January in the Netherlands, Thursday, 1844 at the moment. It's almost 7 in the evening. Now, we can read this. Virtual nationwide parade.
Biden inauguration to feature virtual, Nationwide parade. President-elect Joe Biden arrives at St. Edmund Catholic Church in Rehoboth Beach, Del, Sunday, January 3, 2021. Carolyn Castor, app. Email, print, Reddit, tweet, share, Pinterest. More by Associated Press published.
And this is on stripes.com. Stripes.com. Biden inauguration to feature virtual nationwide parade.
January 4, 2021. Stars and Stripes is making stories on the coronavirus pandemic available free of charge. See other free reports here. Sign up for our daily coronavirus newsletter here. Please support our journalism with a subscription. Washington, President-elect Joe Biden's inauguration will include a virtual parade across America consistent with crowd limits during the coronavirus era, organizers announced Sunday. Following the swearing-in ceremony on Inauguration Day on January 20 on the west front of the U.S. Capitol, Biden and his wife, First Lady Jill Biden, will join Vice President-elect Kamala Harris and her husband in participating in a socially distanced pass-in review on the Capitol's opposite front side. Those are military traditions where Biden will review the readiness of military troops. Article
Medical
continues
disclaimer.
below. Biden will
The
also
content of
receive
this
a
video
traditional
is not
presidential
intended to be a
escort with
substitute for professional medical advice,
Sorry,
diagnosis,
my,
or treatments.
disclaimer
Always seek
was
the
still
advice
on.
of your physician or other qualified.
Sorry, my disclaimer was still on. It happens sometimes.
representatives from every branch of the military from 15th Street in Washington to the White House. That, the Presidential Inaugural Committee says, will be socially distanced too, while providing the American people and world with historic images of the president-elect proceeding to the White House without attracting large crowds. Advertising. Workers in recent days began dismantling an inaugural parade reviewing stand in front of the White House as Biden's transition team continues to prepare for festivities that will be mostly virtual. Accordingly, organizers also said they will hold a virtual parade nationwide to celebrate America's heroes, highlight Americans from all walks of life in different states and regions, and reflect on the diversity, heritage, and resilience of the country as we begin a new American era. The parade event will be televised and feature diverse, dynamic performances in communities across the country, the inaugural committee promised. Participants will be announced in coming weeks. We are excited about the possibilities and opportunities this moment presents to allow all Americans to participate in our country's sacred inaugural traditions, said Presidential Inaugural Committee Executive Director Madhu Varghese said in a statement.
Okay, let's see if there's anything else. Oklahoma guard delivers state's first COVID-19 vaccine. That was on nationalguard.mil. National Guard to deploy, quote, at least, quote, 10,000 troops to DC ahead of inauguration, Daily Caller. dailycaller.com.
National Guard to deploy at least 10,000 troops to D.C. ahead of inauguration. Trump supporters hold Stop the Steal rally in D.C. amid ratification of presidential election. Photo by Samuel Corm. Getty Images. Comments Anders Hagstrom, White House correspondent, January 11, 2021, 2:32 p.m. ET. Font size. The National Guard will have at least 10,000 troops deployed to Washington, D.C. by Saturday to prepare for President-elect Joe Biden's January 20 inauguration, the Associated Press reported Monday. The troops will guard against violent protests over Biden's inauguration following the storming of the U.S. Capitol last week in support of President Donald Trump, Democratic D.C. Mayor Muriel Bowser and the U.S. Department of the Interior have closed off several locations throughout the city thanks to credible threats ahead of inauguration. The FBI says armed protests prior to the inauguration have been planned in all 50 states. The additional troops represent a nearly tenfold increase in security over the city's typical reserve of 1,100. Biden's inauguration has announced America United as its theme. It comes as Trump's approval rating hit its lowest ever point at just 33%. An overwhelming majority, 60%, disapprove of the president. Related, 41% of Republicans, 63% of voters think Trump is somewhat or very responsible for Capitol riots. Trump announced last week on Twitter that he will not attend Biden's inauguration, a move no president has taken since 1869. Vice President Mike Pence has broken with Trump and will attend the inauguration. Trump's administration has seen a wave of resignations since the storming of the Capitol, which Democrats and many Republicans claim Trump incited. 10 senior administration officials had announced their resignations as of Friday, including Education Secretary Betsy DeVos and Transportation Secretary Elaine Chao, the wife of Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell. Yesterday, our country experienced a traumatic and entirely avoidable event as supporters of the president stormed the Capitol building following a rally he addressed, Chao wrote in a Thursday statement announcing her resignation. As I'm sure is the case with many of you, it has deeply troubled me in a way that I cannot simply set aside.
And then there's another article about this. National Guard says it will deploy at least 10,000 troops in the sea by Saturday to boost security ahead of inauguration. Associated Press via MarketWatch.com. You're approaching your article limits.
Associated Press National Guard says it will deploy at least 10,000 troops in D.C. by Saturday to boost security ahead of inauguration. Published, January 11, 2021 at 2:10 p.m. ET by Associated Press. 3 An additional 5,000 could be requested from other states. Members of the National Guard walked through the rotunda of the U.S. Capitol on Monday. Cleanup efforts have been underway since late Wednesday night, after a mob of President Donald Trump's supporters breached the Capitol to disrupt the counting of Electoral College votes. Stephanie Reynolds, Getty Images, email icon, Facebook icon, Twitter icon, LinkedIn icon, Flipboard icon, print icon, ray size icon. The head of the National Guard says at least 10,000 troops will be deployed in Washington, D.C., by Saturday, and an additional 5,000 could be requested from other states. There are currently 6,200 Guard members in the city from D.C. and 5 nearby states. The increase in requests for Guard members on Monday comes as officials brace for more, possibly violent protests surrounding the inauguration of President-elect Joe Biden. Army Gen. Daniel Hawkinson, chief of the National Guard Bureau, told reporters that he has authorization to bring in up to 15,000 Guard members. He said the number of deployments is changing by the hour and day, based on requests from the Secret Service, the Park Police and the Capitol Police. There have been repeated questions about why Guard members weren't brought in more quickly as the deadly riot at the U.S. Capitol unfolded on Wednesday. Guard officials have said they responded as quickly as they could as the situation spiraled out of control, but said the Capitol Police repeatedly turned down offers for help in the days before the protests. Read full story. Read next. Biden to propose $2 trillion of extra spending. Report President-elect Joe Biden will propose a $2 trillion increase in fiscal spending to help the U.S. economy get through the coronavirus pandemic.
Well, that's quite a lot of money. We can also read the same story probably on news6.com. Oklahoma's own. Perhaps it would be nicer to watch the video. I can review it, let you all know what I think about it.
Armed National Guard troops are in place inside the U.S. Capitol as lawmakers move forward with President Trump's second impeachment.
For high crimes and misdemeanors.
This comes as members of Congress have been briefed on security threats ahead of the inauguration, including potential plans for a large armed protest and a plot to surround the Capitol, White House, and Supreme Court and kill lawmakers. One lawmaker called the briefing chilling.
We will have no tolerance whatsoever for any attempts to disrupt the peaceful transfer of power on January 20th that our Constitution calls for.
Outside the Capitol and across the city, large trucks are being used to block off streets, and boards are going up to protect businesses and private property.
Clearly, we are in uncharted waters, and it is very important that we work with all of our partners.
The security threat isn't just in Washington. The FBI warns of possible armed protests at state capitals across the country. National Guard troops have been activated in several states. Many leaders are promising a zero-tolerance policy.
We welcome peaceful protests, but let me be clear. Law-breaking like we saw last week will not be tolerated here, period.
The Joint Chiefs of Staff have sent a memo reminding all members of the military their mission is to support and defend the Constitution, and confirming that President-elect Joe Biden will be their commander-in-chief on January 20th. Deborah Alfarone, CBS News, Washington.
Well, of course, they'll have to protect the lawmakers, and perhaps it's also an idea to wear a vest, basically, from 16th to the 20th, basically, in Washington, some other places. So the FBI predicts 50 state capitals with armed protests. It's the ABC News article, so people can check my channel for that video. Genuine News. And I need more subscribers and views, etc. It's a relatively new channel, so I still have to build up my viewer audience. People have been broadcasting for years, so they have many subscribers and likes. So I think it's not just the algorithms, people have to pick a topic, if I would sort by most views, most popular. This one has 490 views. CDC proposes concentration camps in America, plans to invade homes and separate families. So yeah, perhaps more controversial stuff. I want to avoid that now. I have no strikes on this channel and I want to keep it that way. Preventing beats curing. And if they have claimed these things, they should be arrested already for illegal incitement to commit these illegal acts, basically, about the lawmakers, which we saw in the video. So I agree that that should not be tolerated. Preventing beats curing the people above all. Whatever is best for the people is what I'm for. And imposing martial law and putting everybody in worker camps is not best for the people. It's the worst thing that could happen, you could argue, besides mutually assured destruction, etc. 2021 writes, yes, Trump is gone. Well, he's not really gone, is he? So we'll see what happens, but best is to prevent all that, to keep protests peaceful, safety first. Also get storable food now, be prepared for the worst and go for the best. That's the idea. Thank you all for watching. I will switch to the picture slideshow with my VCam on. VCam be made a little bit smaller. Even. Like this. Put myself in the middle. Then I do the transition. I have transitions, this was the whole broadcast. Kiss for single ladies who would like one. And depart from evil and do good. Trust no one, nothing is what it seems. Test everything you learn. And transform reactive to proactive behavior. Getting lasting fulfillments. Redberg quote. So instead of being reactive, we can be proactive. Instead of doing what they expect of us, etc. We can think what we can do for a better future, for humanity, for the people above all. Perhaps I should finish with the Thomas Jefferson quotes. The limits of tyrants are prescribed by the endurance of those whom they oppress. Is that also a Thomas Jefferson quote? The tree of liberty is nourished with the blood of tyrants. It is its natural manure. Thomas Jefferson. So, thank you all for watching. Keep it peaceful and prevent martial law. I think that benefits the people, not what some of these higher ups might be doing, exposing them. I've made a video about how to prevent martial law, these 5 ways to prevent that. So watch that for more ideas about it, but perhaps it's best to think for ourselves what we can do. What we think their plans are based on the information they give us, put together the pieces of the puzzle and then make a safe strategy. To use legal methods to prevent martial law from being imposed and to survive whatever they've planned for us, to survive the population reduction and the population reduction methods. I did a video to 10 population reduction methods and countermeasures. So for every measure we can think about how we can survive that ourselves. Not just regurgitate and copy and paste the news that we get from them, but also scan deeper and amplify the truths that we must amplify to create the perfect society in which we all will live happily eternally. I think that's a good idea. Okay. So thank you all for watching. Tune in next time on Genuine News. I'm Ulrich Hoffman. May peace be with you all. Till next time on Genuine News.